Is that okay? Oh, is it okay if I mute the TV? Okay, yeah.
Sorry about that.
I watch TV.
Picture either. Thank you. There we go.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if you want to.
No, I don't think so.
Oh.
Especially now. Good afternoon, happy holidays, happy Valentine's Day. My name's Robert. I'm going to play classical piano, maybe a little gospel as well. And I figured I'd start with improvising for you. And can kind of be however you want it to be, but I thought it might be funny if I take some sort of famous love song. You know this one, right? What's it called again? You know that? You know what I mean, right? If I play that in the style of Liszt or Chopin and do some improvisation, it might be kind of funny. So let's see what happens. Okay, so. I don't know how romantic that really was, but whatever. Now I'm going to play some classical pieces. This is from Beethoven's Violin Concerto. Actually, everything I'm doing is an arrangement of violin music now. Why? Well, it's because I like to pretend to be something I'm not. And the other reason is that I wanted to learn violin very badly, but I figured it's too much trouble to learn a new instrument. So what I've been doing instead, sort of to compensate for this wish, is to play arrangements of violin music, and there's a lot of it for piano. Beethoven himself did this arrangement of his violin concerto. And the reason he did is because the first performance with the violin in 1806 was kind of a dud. Most of the people listening fell asleep. And he was not happy with that, so he rewrote the piece for piano. But see, nowadays, everyone loves the violin version. It often goes like that. Composers will write something, and in their lifetime, the music is not loved. And then long after they're gone, everybody loves the music. Wouldn't it be nice if people could, anyway, in their lifetime? So, this piece for Beethoven is very introspective. You're going to hear what I mean. It's quite meditative, you know? And the reason is maybe complicated in a way, because Beethoven, at this time, he was losing his hearing, and he knew it. And so one conductor suggests, it's Adrian Bolt, the great British conductor, he said that he thinks that this piece is a work about philosophical acceptance, that Beethoven is here sort of accepting what's happening to him. And what's great about Beethoven, and typical of a Enlightenment thinker, because he really was the product of the Enlightenment era, is the unwavering hope that he had, no matter what, in his music. So he was able to compose even when he lost most of his hearing. He could hear music in his head, he could visualize it almost. And that's, I think, why Beethoven touches so many people, because he has this optimism. No matter what happened, he was able to overcome it, kind of like the hero myth or whatever in ancient Greece. So this second movement is like a hymn. I'll play the opening, you'll see what I mean. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm getting a little too fired up with Beethoven. I'm tripping. No worries, it's fine. I wasn't looking where I was going, So you see, it sounds like something that you might sing in a church service. And to me, it's also suggesting the countryside. Beethoven loved the countryside and spent a lot of time there. And he wrote a whole symphony about it, the number 6 symphony. And you hear these horn calls, which they used horns for hunting at that time, back before they had the duck whistles you could buy at Walmart or whatever. I don't know anything about hunting, I just live in a rural area, so, you see the horn calls? That's French horn calls. So here's the second movement of Beethoven. I figure over there I'm going to, later when I go play in the other area, I'm going to play the first movement for them. So if you want to hear more, here it is, second movement of the Beethoven. So, I was thinking about today's Valentine's Day, and everything I'm playing is not necessarily connected to the holiday, but there is a way to connect it to that, which is this. So Beethoven, actually, I mentioned that he was losing his hearing around this time. And he went through this very dark period when he wrote a letter to one of his brothers. It's called the Heilige Stadt Testimony. And he describes what it was like to lose his hearing, especially for a musician like him. And he considered ending his life. Really, it's quite dark. But he found this resolve, he found this hope to keep going. And one of the other things that happened with Beethoven is he consciously isolated himself with his hearing. It's not like now where you can get hearing aids or there are different things you can do, but not back then. And he felt so self-conscious about it that he just went into this sort of self-imposed isolation. And he never married, and I don't mean to be the musical version of People magazine, but I don't know it doesn't seem that he dated anyone or anything, but the point is that I don't think that romantic love is the only way one can experience a feeling of love. For instance, that piece. Despite all the troubles of his losing his hearing and everything, don't you feel that there's the feeling of love there? Yes. I think that maybe when he walked in nature and he would go to the countryside, he would experience that sort of a different kind of philosophical love, you could call it. So I think that that's one way. Maybe that's a little bit far-fetched, but I'm trying to thread everything to Valentine's Day. So the next piece could be a romantic piece. It's by the composer Joachim Raff, R-A-F-F. You ever heard of him?
No.
Neither have I. Well, now I know because I play him. But until I learned this piece, I really hadn't heard of him. He was a Swiss composer, lived in the late 19th century. During his lifetime, people said he is as great as Schumann and Beethoven. And I don't doubt that. He's a wonderful composer. I listened to his Third Symphony in the car the other day. It's called Into the Forest. If you like YouTube, you can find Into the Forest by Raff, R-A-F-F. But nevertheless, he's not very popular nowadays. He's hardly known at all. And it's just too bad. Some composers they're not played for whatever reason. And sometimes it's a good reason, but oftentimes it's not. I mean, sometimes there's bad music out there, but a lot of the times they're great. Composers like Raff, unjustly overlooked. So this is the Cavatina, which means short song, by Raff. And I think it's a romantic, I think it could be a love song, it sounds like it. Why not? Or if not, we can pretend it is. I don't have perfect pitch. There, it's F sharp D. Isn't that nice? I could make a waltz out of it. Okay, sorry. I'll play the Raff. I like tangents. I love that music. It's so melodic, and that and a box of chocolates is a good, very romantic thing. Could be. This, I wonder why is that piece not more well known? And it reminds me of another composer. So, you know Salieri? Everybody knows that Antonio Salieri. Have you seen that movie, Amadeus?
Yes.
Yeah, and the story is that Salieri was this jealous composer who poisoned Mozart and killed him, which is all not true. Completely not true. You know, they hardly knew each other. And I thought this was unfair when I started reading. I thought, wait a minute. Here's a composer who's been like maligned for 300 years. It's just, I always liked the underdog anyway. I guess I was, you know, for Kansas City, you know, we Super Bowl. I always root for the underdog. And so it turns out, have you heard Salieri's music before? It's on YouTube. He's a great composer. It's just another example. So here, speaking of not so famous composers, I'm going to play a very famous composer's very famous piece, the Air, or Aria in D major by Bach. And this is from his third orchestral suite. You've probably heard it, and probably not on the piano. Because I told you, I'm doing all these violin arrangements. Let me play you the opening, see if it rings a bell. This is it. That was the same F sharp, right? Yeah. So, oh no, that's not the whole piece, but thank you. Thank you. It's a lovely chunk, though. That's the Bach. And so, how to tie Bach into Valentine's Day? I don't know, this is a very dumb thing to say, but you know Bach, he was married and he had, you know how many kids he had? Like 24, he had 24 or 23 kids. I don't understand, that's what they, you know, they'd have that many kids back.
How many times was he married?
Well, twice. His first wife, unfortunately, died. And this was unfortunately very common. People before, you know, in the early 1700s, the medicine wasn't as good. And then he married, I think he married his cousin, which was also more common. I mean, I guess it can happen nowadays, but so I don't want to pry further into the connection between that and value. It might get strange, but the point is that Bach was, you know, but here's the thing. It's an aria, this piece. An aria is usually something from an opera. It's something that's sung. But Bach did not write operas. He didn't write a single opera. He wrote church cantatas. He was a church musician. And that's what this is in the spirit of, more so. He was a religious guy. Handel, for example, wrote operas. And Handel, by the way, was more well known in that time than Bach. And there's a story that Handel, he was German, but he lived in London. And he was visiting the area, and he was asked, Bach wanted to meet him. And Handel thought about it, but he told his, I don't know, manager or whatever they had back then. He said, we don't have, I don't have time to meet some sort of church musician in the provinces. That's what Bach, you know, so just goes to show how things. Handel's great too. But yeah, so finally, I love this quote, speaking about Bach and being religious. There was a writer who said that when God speaks to angels, it probably sounds like Bach. But when angels speak to each other, it probably sounds like Mozart. That was nice. So here's the Bach aria in D major. Thanks. I forgot to mention who did the piano version that I played, the arranger, because the arranger is also as important as the composer. It's like you read something in translation, the translator matters because they're not just doing Google Translate, they're reimagining the text. Well, some maybe do, the not good ones. The arranger of that is a Russian pianist whose name was Alexander Siloty. He lived in the 19th century and was a student of Franz Liszt, not too shabby, and did a lot of arrangements of Bach's music for the piano, for solo piano. Let's see, I'm thinking what to do next. How about, this is going to get a little intense. César Franck. I'm going to play from the violin sonata. I'll do the second movement. This is, should I do this? Yeah, why not? I'll do the second movement. So, the arrangement is by Alfred Cortot, Swiss-French pianist in the 20th century, late 19th, early 20th. So, the Franck Sonata, which I sometimes, my tongue slips and I say Frank Sinatra. You have to be careful with that. The Franck Sonata, he wrote this in the late 19th century. A lot of the music I like is from that time. Oh yeah, and how do I relate this? I can relate this to Valentine's Day in an odd way. So Franck was sort of the opposite of Mozart. He was a late bloomer. He wrote most of his masterpieces, maybe all of them, starting at age 60 or so, as I understand. It's just, he was he wrote things later in life. And the violin sonata and the symphony in D minor and all these things. And the story goes that his wife of many years was at one of the concerts with his new compositions. And his music, as you're going to hear, is very intense. It's very emotional. However, he was a pretty quiet and humble person, as I understand. He was a church organist, not unlike Bach, but in Paris in the 19th century. It's a little different time period. And here's the thing. His wife got mad at him at that concert. And that's something, that's part of relationships too. I mean, everyone has, a little bit, it happens, right? So the reason she got mad at him was she sort of confronted him after the concert and said, so this music, you wrote that music with all of that emotion, and we've been married, 45 years? And you're just this quiet, humble church musician? What have you been hiding from me? I thought it was just really hilarious. So, yes, composers' spouses sometimes got mad at them. Yeah, so that's what I read somewhere. Let's see, this movement is it's very intense, it's very stormy. And by the way, in Belgium, where Franck was from, has anyone been to Belgium?
Yeah.
The weather there is kind of like, a couple days ago, remember, it was like cold and rainy. And I have a friend who went to Belgium on business, and it rained the entire time, and the last day, the sun came out. And everyone, they were like kids running after an ice cream truck. They all went out to get this. It was like the lunch break, sunshine, and then in 5 minutes started raining again. And I think that I have this theory. It's a weird theory, but I have this theory that weather influences composers. And that a composer from a sunny climate is going to sound different from a composer from a rainy and cold climate. And then he lived in Paris, Paris is also pretty rainy, So let's see, the weather. And here's it finally, I played this somewhere and a guy came to me and he said, I had a very distinct association for this piece. I said, what is it? He said the hurricane that happened in Nashville and some of the footage of the chaos, and he said, I could see that in that music. And then there's these moments in the piece that are very quiet and very peaceful. He said what he imagined in those moments was the backdrop of the Blue Ridge Mountains. And I love that because I love thinking in images with music. And I like when people have their own images that just come up that they haven't worried about, like, am I supposed to? There's no supposed to in music. That's how I say about listening to music. It's like food. You know those restaurants that everybody says, you have to try it, it's really good, and then you try it and it's like, well, I don't know if I really like, but I can't say that music should be like food, you know, you either like it or you don't. So, and you might not like this. Actually, this is not easy listening. This is really heavy stuff. And then maybe you'll see ultimately why his wife got mad at him. I played that somewhere, and afterwards a lady just blurted out after the last note, "He must have been an angry, angry man." I thought that was funny. So, but that's the front. It's heavy, heavy stuff. Heavy stuff. And that's only the second movement. There's 4 movements. And now I'm going to try out a piece that I've just learned. So if it's not up to where it should be, I apologize. But I'm just going to, you need to play new pieces somewhere. So I'm going to play for you, and then hopefully next time I'm here, it'll be a little better. This is the Hebrew melody by Joseph Akron. And Joseph Akron, he took a popular Yiddish folk melody, and he elaborates on it. It's really his own composition, but using this melody. This is my own arrangement of his. It's a violin and piano piece. So when I say it's my arrangement, I mean I pretty much just took the violin part and tried to play it with whatever fingers I can. That's what it is, really. And, speaking of Valentine's Day and love, he dedicates it to the memory of his father. So that's family love. That's the love of parents and siblings. And you could feel that reverence and that love in this piece. It's a very sad piece, too. So we're not going to end with a sad piece. We have to end with something a little more fun. So we're getting to that. But here is Joseph Akron, Hebrew melody. see. I have a little bit of time, so I'll play a couple more things. This is a piece by Tchaikovsky, the melody in E flat major, and how to relate this to Valentine's Day. Thinking of, I didn't really plan. These are just pieces I'm playing, but Tchaikovsky had a really hard time with his love life, which was for a very simple reason. He was homosexual, and in Russia at that time, and unfortunately today in Russia as well. My mother's from Russia and can tell about this. That was so I don't want to say even looked, he was really persecuted for that. And he even tried marrying a woman. They tried it for a short time. It was a disaster. And he suffered greatly in his lifetime because of that, hiding that. And there's some speculation, they don't know, but there's some speculation he took his own life even. If you listen to his Sixth Symphony, the Pathétique, it's very intense and very dark, and you can feel the sense of he wasn't allowed to be who he was, and that's horrible. And despite that, his music has this exhilarating feel. I mean, think of the ballets that he wrote. Swan Lake, The Nutcracker. By the way, the story of Swan Lake was he went to visit some friends in the mountains. They had a lake house. People did that back then too. They'd have fun too. So he went to this lake house, and apparently he didn't know how to swim. So I don't know why he went out into the lake, but he did. And he started to drown. And then as he was drowning, he heard, I got the notes wrong, but he heard that melody. And of course, I guess his friends rescued him because otherwise he wouldn't have written it down, right? So anyway, I told you I was going to end with some more upbeat stuff, so we're not quite. Oh, that looks just like my cat on the TV that passed. But I have two really crazy cats. I mean, they're just. I don't know what. Is this some kind of new litter? Yeah, that looks like my younger cat. And lying back like that and being all. Okay. Anyways, so. Tchaikovsky, and I do love my cats very much. They just sometimes they really push it, but Okay. Tchaikovsky's Melody in E flat. right, I'm going to do something a little sunnier. I'm going to play a Spanish-themed piece by a Cuban-born composer. Both of those are sunny, warm places, and they also, maybe it's ridiculous, but you know there's two parts of Europe, right? Really, there's only two. There's butter Europe and olive oil Europe. North of a certain point, they cook with butter. South of a certain point, they cook with olive oil. So now we're going to olive oil Europe. This is the Malagueña by Ernesto Lecuona. It's a famous piece. He was from Cuba, but this is definitely, it's a piece of Spain. Malagueña means a woman from Malaga, and Malaga is one of the centers of flamenco music. Now, I'm no scholar or musicologist, but the flamenco music's roots are very interesting because it's a melting pot of several things. Spain in the Middle Ages was Arabic, and so there's a huge influence of Arabic music in flamenco, number one. There was also, at that time, this was before 1492, a thriving Jewish civilization, and you can still see the synagogues in Cordoba and Seville in the south of Spain. And that musical tradition of chanting and all that, that's part of flamenco music. And then finally there's gypsy music, because there's as is now, there's a large gypsy population, and gypsy music infused that style too. So if you mix all of that together, you get flamenco. And that's what this piece is, it's a flamenco piece. So, here it is.
Would you folks be quiet?
No, it's okay. I'll close now before heading off with really short Southern gospel. I'm going to do some improvisation around Down by the Riverside. It's a great spiritual, and the words are really, I mean, we could think of the words more today, like there's a line there, ain't gonna study war no more. Wouldn't that be nice? And I was gonna say one more thing about it. Sorry, I'm going blank here, but oh yeah, well, people ask me, what, you play all this classical and then the gospel, like what's the connection? Okay, the connection is both of my parents are immigrants. I told you, my mother's from the Soviet Union, and my dad is an immigrant from Southern Virginia. So that is where the gospel comes in. And he always he always was nudging me and saying, when are you going to play some real music? Hank Williams Sr., not Junior, but Senior. And anyway, it's a very interesting. So I'm going to play real quick and then I head over to the other area. Thank you all for having me today. It's been fun. Happy Valentine's Day. And I'm sorry if not everything I played is quite in the theme of Valentine's Day, but I sort of made the connection, like César Frank's wife getting mad at him. I mean, that is part of love too. So anyway, here it is. Thank you. Happy Valentine's Day. Be safe out there and don't eat too much chocolate. All right? Because it is, it's just a propaganda thing for the chocolate companies anyways. Which is fine because everyone could use more chocolate. So, all right. I'm sorry. I'll see you later. Okay. Yeah.